Blayne, let's go to Lexington, talk to some Kentucky Wildcats. We talked about change. This is a common theme with a lot of these teams. Changing over at the coordinator spot. Who's the new OC? It's February the 10th, and we still have no idea as Mark Stoops continues to look for his replacement of Liam Coen. A new look offense, right, as Devin Leary is no longer there. And, Devin Leary, Blayne, let's call it what it is. Admittedly, a guy that I don't think lived up to the hype and the expectations that most put on. Yeah, that's putting it kindly,
Not
right?
me.
Yeah, and I was the same way. Had super high expectations for Devin Leary. Speaking of Georgia transfer Brock Vandagriff. He transfers in. He takes over. This is a guy that I think has like 40 career passing attempts, but the ceiling in regards to talent is through the roof. No more Ray Davis at the running back spot. You've got the great receivers, Barryon Brown, Dane Key. I feel like, though, Kentucky's spring, Blayne, it's all about Brock Vandagriff. That and getting back to that Kentucky physicality on the offensive line. As good as Ray Davis was, the Cats still struggled to run the football, and that was their Achilles heel in some games last year. I think of the South Carolina game specifically, where they couldn't find any sort of offensive balance, couldn't get anything going, and that was the thing, I think, one of the big things that held them back. Your thoughts on Kentucky going into spring, specifically on the offensive side, again, an offense right now that doesn't even have a leader at OC yet.
Yeah, no, I think Brock Vandagriff it's gonna be interesting because he was kind of handpicked by Liam Coen right for that type of style that Sean McVay tree that you have there underneath Liam Coen. So he went and studied with Sean McVay, of course, with the Rams for a year, and now that's probably a big part of the reason why he's getting that job there in Tampa. But Brock Vandagriff, he's really going to have to it's going to be somebody. He's got a strong arm. He's got great mobility. So you're an offensive coordinator that comes in. You got lots of different ways you can utilize him. He is going to have to gain that game experience, okay? But when it comes down to it, this Florida – I say Florida because Gerald Mincey came from Tennessee, and then he was at Florida before that is what I was just thinking. He comes in and adds to the offensive line, and I think you're going to be a whole lot better at the offensive line. You get Eli Cox and Jagger Burton back. That's going to be something that we need to see is that, like you mentioned, that physicality.
And okay, Eric Wolford is back in Lexington, by the way. Eric Wolford.
Oh, yeah. From Alabama. That's huge. Yeah. That's huge. Yeah. And who would have thought that? Because I think him and Mark Stoops almost came to blows when he was leaving. I think he deuced out on a recruiting trip during the middle. So that was listen, anybody can come back, but they've added their in an area of need at the offensive line with Gerald Mincey, a guy that started for Tennessee, okay, came from Florida before that to Tennessee, and now, okay, here he comes over to Kentucky. They've got Jalen Farmer that comes from Florida, okay, so all kinds of Florida ties coming into Kentucky that are going to add to that offensive line. I think it's just, okay, how does Brock Vandagriff distribute the football and take care of the football when you're talking about these receivers? Dane Key, does he live up to his potential there? Barryon Brown, can he become more of a complete receiver, not just a kick returner and gadget type guy? Anthony Brown, does he make a step forward? Dingle, listen, Dingle went in the portal as tight end and came back out of the portal. That was a huge retention there by Mark Stoops. So NIL dollars well spent to be able to keep him there in Lexington. Running back wise, Chip Trayanum is a lot better than people I think are going to give him credit for. He really pulled Ohio State out of the fire a couple of times when Travion Henderson was hurt. So I think Chip Trayanum is going to be a nice addition. I don't know if he'll be Ray Davis, but he's going to be pretty dang good.
Blayne, the experience for Kentucky returning 49%. They rank 102nd on Bill Connolly's, returning production rankings. 49%, 45% on offense, 52% on the defensive side. One of the newcomers, though, in the Kentucky Wildcat that I'm most excited to hear about throughout the spring, keep up with, is a former Georgia Bulldog yet again, Jamon Dumas-Johnson. I think this is a really intriguing story, though, a guy that maybe – from dog fans and dog folks I talked to, kind of got lost in the shuffle. Obviously, the depth at Georgia is incredible. But he goes all of a sudden from going to Athens, where it's extremely competitive. Not to say Kentucky's not competitive, but this dude all of a sudden I think could be a mega star at the linebacker position for Kentucky. Wildcat, you're most excited to see. And then for the Kentucky defensive side, what you're most excited to hear about from that regard, because physicality defensively has been a calling card for the Cats as well. It's got to continue under Mark Stoops this fall.
They know what they have at the corner position, the boundary corner that they play Maxwell Hairston at. This is a pick six waiting to happen. He had a lot of big things. I think JQ Hardaway on the other side is a guy that the field corner is going to have to establish himself a little bit. He's going to have to get a little bit more polished, a little rough around the edges last year coming over from Cincinnati to Kentucky. Now with a year of SEC under his belt, how does he do out there? Because sometimes when you're that field corner, you can be out on an island, and I think they're going to have to really see, okay, what happens there with JQ Hardaway. Got a ton of experience in that front with Eric Jackson, with JJ Weaver, with Deion Walker, Josiah Hayes, Keyshawn Silver, Octavius Oxendine, all of those guys. They've been there forever along the Kentucky front, but can JQ Hardaway really help solidify that back end?
I'm also curious too, Blayne, just kind of the vibe around Kentucky this spring, right? It wasn't too long ago that we thought Mark Stoops was on the way out. We thought he was going to take the Texas A&M job. It was another Greg Schiano with Tennessee situation where I think the backlash and the pushback, and I don't care what Ross Bjork said, who's now at Ohio State, obviously. I don't care what he had to say. That went a long way, I think, in Mark Stoops not being the next head coach at Texas A&M. Also, Stoops was very critical of his fan base last year at NIL, and I'm kind of curious to see how he navigates that, and maybe he tries to warm up to the Wildcat folks, because I just, after that season last year where you underachieve and you kind of ruffle some feathers, I don't know. It's Mark Stoops is an interesting territory, right? Because he's won big at Kentucky, but everybody's got an expiration date, and if you keep poking the bear, yours could be sooner than later.
Yeah, and I think you do that just by winning ball games, right? I mean, I think they got to start 3-1. They'll lose that Georgia game, on September 14th, more than likely. But you got to beat Southern Miss, South Carolina, and Ohio before you have to go on the road to Vaught Hemingway and play Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin and company. Probably going to be 3-2 before that bye game, and then you get to come out and really hit it running with Vanderbilt and Florida in back-to-back games. Vanderbilt, Florida, and Auburn. If you want to be what you think you can be, which is a team that is, consistently 8-9 wins every year, that's what you want to be your floor at Kentucky, then you got to win those ball games. You got to beat Vanderbilt, you got to beat Florida in a down year, and you also have to beat Auburn. So when you come into those, Auburn at home, mind you. So when you come in that way, that's the biggest way, Chris, that he can warm himself up to the fan base. If there is any tension there, is just put W's on the board.
There is no medicine better, Blayne, than wins, right, when it comes to SEC football fans.